She didn't hesitate. She switched the glass, met his eyes, and knew she'd just stopped a murder. The Mafia boss didn't thank her, didn't react. He just watched, already deciding who would die for what she'd done. Because saving his life didn't make her a hero, it made her part of the fallout. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. She didn't panic. She didn't look around for permission. She simply reached forward and changed fate with her bare hands. One glass, 1 second, one decision that would expose betrayal, unleash silent violence, and permanently alter 2 lives. Her name was Ellie Smith, and she wasn't trying to be brave that night. She was 25, working as a waitress in one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, where power whispered through dark wood walls and portraits of dead men watched every table. She was sharp, observant, direct by nature. She noticed things other people missed, not because she was afraid, but because she paid attention. She wasn't looking for trouble. She wasn't looking to be a hero. But sometimes life doesn't give you the luxury of choice. Sometimes it puts a poisoned glass in front of a mafia boss and asks you who you really are when no one's watching. And Ellie? She made a choice that saved a killer's life and pulled her into a world where silence means survival and loyalty is paid in blood. This is her story, and I promise you, by the end, you'll never look at a single moment of courage the same way again. Because what started with a switched wine glass ended with everything changing. Stay with me. You need to hear this. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about a woman named Ellie Smith. She was sharp-eyed and steady-handed, the kind of person who moved through life with quiet confidence. At 25, she worked at Belmonte, one of the city's most exclusive old-world restaurants, the kind of place where a single bottle of wine costs more than most people make in a month. Dark wood walls absorbed whispered conversations. Framed portraits of men in military uniforms and formal dress lined the corridor. The scent of aged leather and imported cigars lingered in the air like a promise. If you passed Ellie on the street, you might not notice her. But in that restaurant, behind that careful professionalism, she saw everything. Every subtle power play, every uncomfortable silence, every person who thought they were invisible. Because in her world, being observant wasn't paranoia, it was survival. That November night started like any other. The restaurant hummed with the kind of quiet power that only money and violence can buy. White tablecloths stretched across mahogany tables. Crystal glassware caught amber light from brass fixtures mounted on wood-paneled walls. Men in $1,000 suits spoke in lowered voices about things that would never appear in newspapers. Ellie moved between tables with practiced efficiency, reading the room the way musicians read sheet music instinctively, completely. She carried a tray of wine glasses balanced on her left palm, her burgundy shirt and cream apron pressed crisp, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She'd served senators here, hedge fund managers, real estate developers whose names appeared on buildings downtown. She knew how to be present without being intrusive, how to anticipate needs without being asked. And then Milan de Kock walked in. The room adjusted around him. Not obviously. Nothing so crude as silence falling or heads turning. But Ellie felt it the way air pressure drops before a storm. Conversations continued, but voices lowered half a degree. Postures straightened. Eyes tracked movement without appearing to look. Milan was maybe 40, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit with no tie. His dark hair was slicked back, his full beard groomed with precision. Tattoos climbed from beneath his collar, black ink spreading across his neck in patterns. Ellie couldn't quite read. More ink decorated his hands, symbols and script that looked Russian or Eastern European. He moved like a man who'd never been told no. 2 men flanked him. The one on his left was older, gray at the temples, wearing wire-rimmed glasses. The one on his right was younger, broader, with the kind of stillness that came from violence kept barely in check. They took a corner table beneath a portrait of some long-dead industrialist. The positioning wasn't accidental. Milan sat with his back to the wall, eyes on both entrances. Ellie's manager, Thomas, personally escorted them. He didn't shake hands, didn't make small talk, just seated them with professional efficiency and disappeared. Ellie didn't need to be told who they were. She'd worked at Belmonte long enough to recognize danger when it walked through the door. 20 minutes later, she approached their table with water and menus. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Milan looked up. His eyes were dark, not brown, but something deeper. Calculating. The kind of eyes that measured everything and forgot nothing. "Wine list," he said. His voice was low, accented, not Italian. Something Eastern European buried under years of American English. Ellie handed him the leather-bound menu. "Of course. I'll give you a moment." The older man with glasses leaned forward. "The Barolo. The 2015. Excellent choice," Ellie said, making a note. She returned to the bar, placed the order, and watched from a professional distance as their evening unfolded. They didn't laugh, didn't raise their voices, spoke in short sentences with long pauses between. The younger man barely touched his water. The older one checked his phone twice. Milan sat perfectly still, occasionally lifting his gaze to scan the room. When Ellie brought the wine, she poured a tasting portion for Milan first. He swirled it once, inhaled, sipped, nodded. She filled the glasses, Milan's, then the older man's, then the younger's. "Thank you," Milan said, and dismissed her with nothing more than a shift in his attention. It happened 40 minutes into their meal. The older man's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, murmured something to Milan, and stood. He stepped away from the table, moving toward the corridor near the restrooms, phone pressed to his ear. Ellie was refilling water glasses 2 tables away. She saw the younger man reach forward. His movement was smooth, practiced, unremarkable. He lifted Milan's wine glass, as if examining it against the light. Then, just as casually, he switched it with his own. The exchange took 3 seconds, maybe less. Ellie's hand froze mid-pour. Her brain caught up half a heartbeat later. The confidence, the timing, the distraction. This wasn't clumsiness. This was professional. Ellie didn't think. She crossed the distance in 4 steps, tray in hand, smile fixed in place. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said brightly. "I believe these may have gotten switched during service." And before the younger man could respond, she reached forward and switched the glasses back. Her hand was steady. Her eyes met Milan's for half a second. In that instant, everything communicated. She saw recognition flash across his face. Not confusion, not surprise. Understanding. Someone had just tried to kill him, and the waitress had stopped it. Milan said nothing. He didn't react, didn't look at the younger man, didn't reach for the wine. He simply held Ellie's gaze for 1 beat longer than necessary. Then he lowered his eyes to his plate and continued eating. Ellie stepped back, tray balanced perfectly, and walked away, her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands didn't shake. Behind her, she heard the older man return from his phone call, his voice resuming conversation as if nothing had happened. But Ellie knew better. Everything had just changed, and Milan de Kock had decided something in that half-second of eye contact. What he did next would determine whether she lived or died. Milan de Kock had survived 17 years in a world where most men didn't last 5. He'd survived because he understood one fundamental truth. The moment you react is the moment you lose control. So when the waitress switched the glasses back, when her dark eyes met his for that fraction of a second and communicated everything without saying a word, Milan did what had kept him alive all these years. He did absolutely nothing. He cut another piece of veal, chewed slowly, swallowed. His face remained impassive, almost bored, but behind that carefully constructed mask, Milan's mind moved like a blade through water, silent, fast, lethal. The hit was professional. That much was clear. The timing had been perfect. The phone call creating the distraction. The switch executed with the kind of confidence that came from practice. No hesitation, no second-guessing. This wasn't panic. This wasn't improvisation. This was a contract. And contracts meant money, organization, multiple moving parts. Milan's eyes stayed on his plate, but his peripheral vision tracked everything. The older man Gregor had returned from his phone call and resumed eating. His expression was neutral, his movements relaxed. If he knew what had just happened, he was hiding it flawlessly. The younger man, Alexei, had gone very still. Too still. Milan noted the tension in Alexei's shoulders, the way his jaw had tightened, the way his eyes flicked once toward the wineglass, then away. Alexei knew the waitress had interfered, and he was calculating whether to try again. Milan took a sip of water, set the glass down with deliberate care. "Alexei," he said quietly, his accent making the name sound almost gentle. "Tell me about the shipment." Alexei blinked. "Sir?" "The shipment. From Gdańsk. You said there was a delay." "Yes. Customs. They're requesting additional documentation, and you have handled this." "Of course." Milan nodded slowly. He picked up his wine glass, the one the waitress had placed back in front of him, and held it up to the light. Deep red, almost black in the center. Beautiful. He inhaled the bouquet. Let the silence stretch. Then he set it down without drinking. This wine, Milan said, his voice soft, is very expensive. You know this? Yes, sir. $2,000. For one bottle. Milan's eyes lifted to meet Alexei's. A man would have to be very sure before he recommended something so expensive. Yes, very confident it was. Exactly what it claimed to be. Sweat appeared at Alexei's hairline. Yes, sir. Milan smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I think perhaps I am not in the mood for wine tonight after all. He pushed the glass away. Across the restaurant, Ellie refilled coffee cups with hands that had finally started to shake. She'd been working on autopilot for the last 20 minutes, smiling, taking orders, delivering food, but her mind kept returning to that table in the corner, to the man with the tattoos and the dark eyes who'd understood everything in a single glance. She'd saved his life. She was certain of it now. And the man sitting beside him, the one who'd switched the glasses he'd tried to kill him, Ellie's throat felt tight. She should tell someone. Call the police. Report what she'd seen. Except she couldn't prove anything. And the kind of men who wore $1,000 suits and carried violence in their eyes weren't the kind who got arrested on a waitress's testimony. She was trapped in a story she hadn't asked to be part of. And she had no idea how it would end. Milan watched the waitress move through the dining room. She was good at her job. Professional. Efficient. But he could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she avoided looking in his direction. She was afraid. Smart. Excuse me, Milan said, rising from his seat. I need to make a call. Gregor looked up, surprised. Now? Yes, now. Milan walked past the restrooms, past the kitchen entrance, and out the back exit into the alley. The November air bit at his face. He pulled out his phone and dialed. 2 rings. Duh? Dmitri. I need 3 men at Belmonte. Now. 1 on the front exit, 1 on the back, 1 inside, near the bar. Trouble. Information gathering. No action yet. Just eyes. 10 minutes. Milan hung up. He stood in the alley for a moment, breathing the cold air, letting his mind work. Someone inside his organization wanted him dead. That was clear. But who? And how many? The phone call Gregor had taken, Milan would need that traced. The timing was too convenient. Too precise. And Alexei. Young, ambitious Alexei, who'd been with him for 3 years, who'd proven himself loyal a dozen times over, or had seemed to. Milan had learned long ago that loyalty was the easiest thing to fake and the hardest thing to buy. He walked back inside. When Milan returned to the table, dessert menus had arrived. He sat down and studied the options as if assassination attempts were as common as rainfall. The tiramisu, he said to Ellie when she approached. His eyes met hers again. And this time he let something show. Not gratitude, not warmth, recognition. Excellent choice, she said, her voice steady despite everything. Milan watched her walk away. She was brave. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. Most people would have convinced themselves they'd seen nothing, would have looked away, would have chosen safety over truth. She'd chosen truth. That was rare. And in Milan's world, rare things were either protected or destroyed. He hadn't decided which yet. 20 minutes later, Milan stood to leave. He dropped $500 bills on the table, a tip that would equal Ellie's entire week's wages. As he passed the bar, he caught her eye one final time. Then he walked out into the November night with Gregor and Alexei flanking him. His driver pulled up immediately. A black Mercedes with tinted windows. Where to, sir? The driver asked. Milan studied the rearview mirror. Watched Alexei climb into the back seat. Take the long way, Milan said quietly. Through the industrial district. The driver's eyes flicked to the mirror. He understood. Yes, sir. As the car pulled away from Belmonte, Milan finally allowed himself a small, cold smile. Someone had tried to kill him tonight. They'd failed because a waitress had intervened, but they didn't know she'd intervened, which meant they still thought they had the advantage. Milan leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. That was their first mistake. Their last mistake would come very soon, and it would be permanent. The Mercedes moved through Chicago's streets like a shark through dark water, silent, predatory, inevitable. Milan sat in the back seat, eyes half closed, appearing almost relaxed. Gregor sat beside him, scrolling through his phone. Alexei sat across from them, his knee bouncing slightly, a nervous tell that hadn't been there an hour ago. The driver took them south, away from the glittering downtown towers, toward the industrial district, where streetlights grew sparse and warehouses crouched in the darkness like sleeping giants. Milan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A text from Dimitri, his head of security, in position. Milan typed back. Trace the call. Gregor's phone. 8:47 p.m. 3 dots appeared. Then, on it. Milan pocketed his phone and looked out the window. Sir? Alexei's voice cut through the silence. Are we not going back to the estate? Detour, Milan said simply. I need to check on something at the warehouse. At this hour? Milan's eyes shifted to Alexei. Cold. Flat. Is that a problem? No, sir. Of course not. The knee stopped bouncing, but Alexei's hand moved to his jacket pocket, checking for something. A weapon, perhaps. Or a phone. Milan noted it, said nothing. Ellie's hands trembled as she counted her tips in the employee break room. $500. From one table. She stared at the bills spread across the scratched formica table, her mind racing. It wasn't gratitude. It couldn't be. Men like that didn't tip out of kindness. It was a message. I see you. I know what you did. But what did it mean? Was it protection? A warning? A target on her back? Damn, girl. Her coworker Jessica appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Did you sleep with someone or save their life? Ellie's laugh came out shaky. I don't even know. Well, whatever you did, do it again tomorrow. Jessica grabbed her purse. I'm heading out. You good? Yeah. I just need a minute. Jessica left, and Ellie was alone with her thoughts and $500 that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. She gathered the bills, folded them carefully, and tucked them into her wallet. Then she pulled out her phone and did something she immediately regretted. She Googled, Milan de Kock, Chicago. The results loaded. Her stomach dropped. Dimitri worked fast. In a nondescript office above a dry cleaner on the south side, he sat surrounded by computer monitors, his fingers flying across 3 keyboards simultaneously. Gregor's phone records appeared on screen 1. Call logs. Duration. Location data. The 8:47 p.m. call had lasted 93 seconds. The receiving number was a burner, untraceable through normal channels. But Dimitri didn't use normal channels. He routed through cell tower triangulation, cross-referenced with the restaurant's security camera footage timeline, and pulled the audio file from the phone company's backup servers. It took him 6 minutes. He called Milan. Da? The call was coded, Dimitri said in Russian. I'm sending you the transcript now. Milan's phone buzzed with the incoming file. He opened it, reading silently. Gregor. Yes? Unknown. The package is ready for delivery. Gregor. Timing. Unknown. Within the hour. Confirmation on receipt? Gregor. You'll know when it's done. Unknown. Payment upon confirmation. Gregor. Understood. Milan read it twice. Then he looked across the car at Gregor, the man who'd been with him for 12 years, who'd stood beside him through 3 wars with rival families, who'd taken a bullet for him in Detroit. Gregor, who'd just sold him out for money. Milan's face showed nothing. How much further? He asked the driver. 5 minutes, sir. Good. Ellie couldn't stop reading. Milan de Kock, alleged head of the de Kock crime organization, has been linked to racketeering, extortion, and suspected involvement in multiple unsolved homicides. Federal investigators believe the de Kock family controls shipping operations throughout the Great Lakes region, known for extreme violence toward rivals and alleged informants. Her phone slipped from her hands onto the break room table. She'd saved a Mafia boss. Not just some connected guy. Not some mid-level enforcer. A boss. And she'd humiliated his assassin in front of him. Ellie pressed her palms against her eyes. What had she done? Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate. You working late? Pizza's getting cold. Ellie typed back. Leaving now. But she sat frozen for another 5 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to convince herself that everything would be fine. That men like Milan de Kock forgot about waitresses. That she was invisible again. Safe. She almost believed it. The warehouse was abandoned. Officially. Anyway. The Mercedes pulled up to a rusted loading dock. No lights. No signs of life. Just corrugated metal and broken windows and the smell of industrial decay. Why are we here? Gregor asked, his voice finally showing a crack of concern. Old business, Milan said, opening his door. Won't take long. They stepped out into the cold. Milan's shoes crunched on gravel. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn moaned. Dimitri emerged from the shadows with 2 other men. Both carried duffel bags. Sir, Dimitri nodded. Show me, Milan said. They walked into the warehouse through a side entrance. Inside, a single work light illuminated a metal table. On it, Gregor's complete phone records, bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and photographs. Gregor meeting with a man Ellie would have recognized, the younger man who'd switched the wine glasses, meeting with him 3 times over the past month, always in public, always casual looking, always followed by deposits into an offshore account. Gregor stopped walking. His face had gone pale. "Milan," he said quietly. "Let me explain." "Please," Milan gestured. "Explain. It wasn't supposed to be you. They told me it was a rival. They said, they lied." Gregor's hand moved toward his jacket. Dimitri's gun appeared first, pressed against Gregor's temple. "Don't," Dimitri said softly. Milan stepped closer. He studied Gregor's face, this man he'd trusted, broken bread with, called brother. "The phone call," Milan said. "It was the signal. If I drank the wine, they would confirm. You would receive payment within the hour." He paused. "How much?" Gregor said nothing. "How much was I worth, Gregor?" 2 million. Milan nodded slowly. "That's all?" He turned away, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. "Alexei was the one who switched the glass," Milan said. "You made the call. Who else?" Silence. "Gregor. Who else?" "I don't know. I swear. They only told me what I needed to know." Milan believed him. That's how these things worked. Compartmentalized. Clean. "Take him," Milan said to Dimitri. "Wait, Milan, please." But Milan was already walking toward the car. Behind him, he heard Gregor's voice rising, then muffled, then silent. He didn't look back. By the time Milan reached the Mercedes, his phone was ringing. "Dimitri?" "Da? It's done. What about the girl?" Milan watched his breath fog in the cold air. "Find out where she lives," he said. He hung up and climbed into the car. The driver asked no questions. They drove back toward the city in silence. And Milan thought about a waitress with steady hands and brave eyes who'd changed everything with one simple choice. She deserved to know what she'd stepped into. And Milan de Kock always paid his debts. The warehouse smelled of rust and old oil, and something else, something metallic that Gregor recognized too late. Fear has a scent. So does betrayal. And so does the moment before death. Dimitri zip-tied Gregor's hands behind his back and guided him to a metal chair bolted to the concrete floor. The 2 other men, faces Gregor had seen 100 times but never really noticed, stood at the perimeter like statues. "Dimitri," Gregor said, his voice cracking. "We've known each other 15 years. 16, Dimitri corrected, his tone almost gentle. "I was there when your daughter was born. Remember? Then you know I wouldn't. But you did." Dimitri crouched in front of him. "You made a choice. Now Milan makes his." Gregor's breath came in short gasps. "He'll forgive me. He always..." "Milan forgives mistakes. He forgives weakness. He forgives fear." Dimitri stood. "He doesn't forgive betrayal." The warehouse door opened, but it wasn't Milan who entered. It was Alexei. His hands were already zip-tied. Blood ran from his nose. One eye was swelling shut. The 2 men who dragged him in threw him to his knees beside Gregor's chair. Alexei looked up, saw Gregor, and something close to relief crossed his battered face. "They got you too," Alexei whispered. Gregor said nothing, because he understood now. This wasn't an arrest. This wasn't an interrogation. This was an execution. Milan sat in the Mercedes 3 blocks away, staring at his phone. On the screen, a photo of Ellie Smith. Dimitri had worked fast. Driver's license, employment records, current address a 3rd-floor apartment in Pilsen, shared with a roommate named Jessica Torres. No criminal record, no debts, no connections to organized crime. Just a 25-year-old woman working at an expensive restaurant, trying to survive in a city that ate people like her for breakfast, and she'd stepped between him and death without hesitation. Why? Milan had spent his entire adult life studying human behavior, understanding motivations, predicting actions. In his world, everyone wanted something. Money, power, protection, status. But what had Ellie wanted? Nothing. She'd simply seen something wrong and corrected it. No calculation, no angle, just instinct. Milan closed the photo and dialed Dimitri. Yes? How many were involved? Alexei made 3 calls tonight, all to the same burner number. We traced it to a prepaid phone purchased in Milwaukee 2 weeks ago. Cash purchase? Yes, but we pulled security footage from the store, running facial recognition now. And Gregor's deposits? Came from a shell corporation in the Caymans, 6 layers deep. We're working backwards. Milan processed this. Professional, organized, well-funded. This wasn't just about him. This was about dismantling his entire operation. Finish it, Milan said quietly. Both of them? Both of them. He ended the call. Inside the warehouse, Dmitri pulled out his phone and read Milan's message. He looked at Gregor, then at Alexei. Stand him up, he said. The two men hauled Alexei to his feet. He swayed, legs barely supporting him. Wait, Alexei started. The gunshot was suppressed. A quiet crack, like a branch snapping. Alexei dropped. The sound echoed once, then disappeared into the vast empty space. Gregor screamed a raw animal sound. Dmitri turned to him. You want to beg? Go ahead. Milan's not here to listen. My family will be taken care of. Milan isn't a monster. Your wife gets your life insurance. Your daughter's college fund stays untouched. They'll be told you died in a car accident. Dmitri's expression was almost sad. You made a choice that ended badly, but Milan won't punish them for your mistake. Gregor's face crumpled. Tears streaked his cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know. Dmitri raised his gun. Wait, who hired us? Don't you want to know? We'll find out. But I can tell you. The second shot was just as quiet as the first. Ellie walked home from the L station. Her hand clutched around the pepper spray in her jacket pocket. The streets of Pilsen were busy even at 11 p.m. families heading home from late shifts. Teenagers clustered on corners, the smell of tacos and car exhaust mixing in the cold air. She felt exposed, visible in a way she'd never felt before. Every car that passed seemed to slow down. Every person who glanced her way seemed to be studying her. The $500 in her purse felt like a tracking device. You're being paranoid, she told herself. He probably doesn't even remember your face, but she remembered his. Those dark eyes, that moment of recognition, the way he'd studied her like she was a problem to be solved. Ellie climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the warmth and safety of home. Jessica was on the couch, pizza box open on the coffee table, watching some reality show. Finally, I'm starving. Jessica stopped. You look like you've seen a ghost. Long night. Tips good? Ellie thought of the $500. Yeah, really good. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed beside Jessica, grabbing a slice of now cold pizza. The normalcy of it, the apartment, the TV, her roommate complaining about her shift at the clinic should have been comforting. Instead, it felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. At 2:47 a.m., Dmitri sent Milan 3 photographs. The warehouse, empty except for dark stains on the concrete, a lake, black water reflecting moonlight, and a final image, 2 phones, destroyed, their SIM cards extracted. Milan studied the photos for a long moment. Then he typed, clean, like it never happened. Milan deleted the conversation and set his phone on the nightstand. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment, thinking about the mathematics of violence. 2 men dead. How many more were involved? 3? 5? 10? Someone had orchestrated this. Someone with resources. Someone who knew his routines, his security, his people. Someone who was still out there, and a waitress had accidentally stepped into the middle of it. Milan reached for his phone and typed a message to Dmitri. Put a team on her. 2 men. Rotating shifts. Tell them to stay invisible. Protection or surveillance? Milan considered the question. Both. He sent the message and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would begin dismantling the conspiracy piece by piece. Tonight, he would ensure that Ellie Smith, the woman who'd saved his life without asking for anything in return, would live to see another morning. It was the least he could do. And Milan de Kock always paid his debts, even when the debtor didn't know they were owed. 3 blocks from Ellie's apartment, a black SUV pulled into a parking space. 2 men sat inside, watching, waiting. Dmitri's orders had been clear. Keep her alive. Keep her safe. And if anyone approaches her who doesn't belong, you call me immediately. The men settled in for a long night. Above them, in apartment 3B, Ellie finally fell asleep. She dreamed of wine glasses and dark eyes and choices that couldn't be undone. She didn't know that outside, in the November darkness, violence had already been delivered, and protection had already been arranged. Ellie woke to pale November sunlight filtering through her bedroom curtains and the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. For approximately 8 seconds, everything was normal. Then memory crashed back the wine glass. The switch, those calculating dark eyes, $500 in her wallet, and the late-night Google search that had confirmed her worst fears. She'd saved a Mafia boss. Ellie pulled the covers over her head and groaned. You alive in there? Jessica called from the kitchen. Debatable. Well, debate faster. I made coffee and I'm leaving in 10 minutes. Ellie forced herself out of bed, pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie, and shuffled into their tiny kitchen. Jessica handed her a mug, black, no sugar, exactly how she needed it. You look like hell, Jessica observed. Thanks. Seriously, what happened last night? You've been weird since you got home. Ellie wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat ground her. How could she explain? Oh, nothing much. Just witnessed an attempted murder and possibly put myself on a hit list. Just a rough shift, she said instead. Demanding customers. Jessica studied her with the practiced eye of someone who'd known her for 3 years. You're lying, but okay. I've got a double at the hospital, so I won't push. But tonight, wine and actual conversation. Deal? Deal. Jessica grabbed her bag and left, and Ellie was alone with her thoughts and her fear and a rapidly cooling cup of coffee. She needed to go to work, needed to act normal, needed to pretend that Tuesday would be just like any other Tuesday, except she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be normal again. The black SUV had changed shifts at 6 a.m. 2 new men now sat in a different parking spot with a clear view of Ellie's building entrance. One drank gas station coffee, the other ate a breakfast burrito that smelled like regret and grease. Dimitri say what she did? The coffee drinker asked. Saved the boss's life. How? 2. Doesn't matter. We keep her breathing. That's the job. They watched a woman in scrubs leave the building, not their target. 10 minutes later, their target emerged. Dark hair and a ponytail, oversized jacket, jeans and sneakers. She walked with her head down, hands shoved in her pockets, toward the L station 2 blocks north. The men followed at a distance. Ellie felt it halfway to the train station. The prickle on the back of her neck, the sensation of being watched. She told herself it was paranoia. PTSD from one really bad night at work. But her instincts, the same instincts that had made her notice the switched wine glass, were screaming. She stopped at a corner store, pretending to browse magazines while checking the reflection in the glass door. A black SUV idled across the street, 2 men inside, not looking at her, but not leaving, either. Ellie's heart hammered. She bought a magazine she didn't want, stepped back onto the sidewalk, and walked toward the L station at a deliberately casual pace. The SUV didn't follow, but when she glanced back from the elevated platform, it was still there, watching. Milan's morning began at 6:30, with 75 minutes of silence. No phone, no interruptions, just coffee and the financial reports Dimitri had compiled overnight. 3 shell corporations, 7 wire transfers, a web of money that led from the Caymans to Cyprus to Singapore, and finally to a bank in Milwaukee. The conspirators had been careful, but not careful enough. Milan's accountant, a nervous man named Bernard, who'd worked for him for a decade, had found the pattern. Small transfers over 6 months, always under reporting thresholds, always to different accounts, but the timing matched. Every transfer corresponded with a meeting between Gregor and outside parties, meetings that Gregor had never reported, meetings that now made perfect, terrible sense. Milan's phone buzzed. Dimitri. Facial recognition came back. The man who bought the burner phone is Konstantin Petrov. Enforcer. Works for the Belov family. Milan set down his coffee. The Belovs. A Russian organization based in Milwaukee, expanding aggressively into Chicago territory. They'd been testing boundaries for 2 years, small provocations, territorial disputes, nothing that required full-scale war, until now. Milan typed back, "How many Belov operations in Chicago? 4 that we know of. Shipping, waste management, 2 construction companies. Shut them down. All of them? All of them." Milan sent the message and stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. Below, Chicago stretched out like a kingdom, his kingdom, built over 15 years of calculated violence and strategic patience. The Belovs wanted it. They'd tried to take it by killing him. They'd failed. Now they would learn what failure cost. Ellie's shift at Belmonte started at 4 p.m. She arrived early, changed into her uniform in the staff bathroom, and tied her apron with hands that shook slightly. Thomas, the manager, stopped her near the kitchen. "You all right?" "Fine. Why? You seem tense, just tired." Thomas didn't look convinced, but he let it go. "Table assignments are posted. You've got the west section tonight. The west section." Not the corner where Milan had sat. Relief flooded through her. Maybe last night had been an aberration. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe she really was invisible again. She made it 3 hours before that hope shattered. The man walked in at 7:15. Ellie was refilling water glasses when she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that fit too well to be anything but expensive. He moved with the same controlled menace she'd seen in Milan, but this wasn't Milan. This was one of his men. He spoke briefly with Thomas, who nodded and gestured toward the back. Then the man's eyes swept the dining room, found Ellie, and locked on. He walked directly to her. Ellie's hands froze mid-pour. "Ellie Smith?" His voice was low, accented. "Russian, maybe?" "Yes. My name is Dmitry Volkov. I work for Milan de Kock. He would like to speak with you." The dining room suddenly felt airless. "I'm working. Your manager has given permission for you to take a break. Come with me, please." It wasn't a request. Ellie set down the water pitcher with trembling hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But where? Out the front door into the street? The black SUV was probably still out there. She was trapped. Where? She managed. "There's a car outside. The conversation will be brief, I promise." Ellie looked around the restaurant. Wealthy diners eating expensive meals, oblivious to the fact that something dangerous was happening 10 feet away. She could scream, could refuse, could make a scene. But she'd seen what Milan was capable of deciding with just his eyes. Making a scene felt like signing her own death warrant. "Okay," she whispered. Dmitry nodded and gestured toward the door. Ellie untied her apron, grabbed her jacket from the break room, and followed him outside. The November air hit her face like a slap. A black Mercedes waited at the curb. The same one from last night. The back door opened. Milan de Kock sat inside, perfectly still, dressed in a dark suit with no tie. Those tattoos climbing his neck. Those eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Smith," he said quietly. "Please, sit." Ellie's legs felt like water, but she climbed in. The door closed behind her, and the car pulled away from the curb, carrying her into a world she'd tried to avoid her entire life. Milan turned to face her, and when he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. "You saved my life last night. I think it's time we discussed what that means." Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd acted without thinking. Now she was about to learn the price. The Mercedes glided through evening traffic with the smooth inevitability of a shark circling prey. Ellie sat pressed against the door, her hand instinctively finding the handle even though she knew jumping from a moving car would solve nothing. Milan sat across from her, perfectly relaxed, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't look at her directly. Instead, he gazed out the window as if they were discussing the weather. "Where are you taking me?" Ellie's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Nowhere, you'll be harmed." "That's not an answer." Milan's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "No, it isn't." The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the dark expanse of Lake Michigan spreading out to their right. City lights reflected on black water like scattered diamonds. "You're afraid," Milan observed. "Wouldn't you be?" "Yes, fear is intelligent." He finally turned to look at her. "But you weren't afraid last night?" "Why?" Ellie's throat felt tight. "I didn't have time to be afraid. Or you saw something wrong and simply acted. Instinct." Milan studied her face. "That's rare. Most people convince themselves they saw nothing. It's safer that way. Maybe I'm not most people. Clearly." The car pulled off the main road into a private parking area beneath a luxury high-rise. The kind of building where doormen wore white gloves and apartments cost millions. Dmitry opened the door. "Sir." Milan stepped out, then waited for Ellie. She had a choice: stay in the car, accomplish nothing, or follow him and get answers. Ellie chose answers. The penthouse elevator required a key card. Dmitry swiped it, pressed the button for the 42nd floor, and stepped back. The doors closed, sealing the three of them in polished brass and uncomfortable silence. Ellie watched the numbers climb. Her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls. She looked small, out of place, dressed in her server's uniform next to men in $1,000 suits. The elevator opened directly into Milan's apartment. Not apartment, domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Minimalist furniture in blacks and grays. Art that Ellie suspected was original and expensive. Everything precise, controlled, revealing nothing personal. "Sit, please." Milan gestured to a leather sofa. Ellie remained standing. "I'd rather know what this is about." Milan nodded as if she'd passed some test. "Direct. Good. I'll be the same." He moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of water, not wine. She noted. "Last night someone tried to kill me. You prevented it. I would like to know why. Why did I stop it?" "Yes." Ellie blinked. Because it was wrong. That's all? What other reason would there be? Milan handed her a glass of water. Their fingers didn't touch. Money, leverage, favor trading. In my world, everyone wants something. I'm not in your world. You are now. The words hung between them like a verdict. Ellie set the water down without drinking. I didn't ask for this. I saw something happen. I reacted. That's it. And if you'd done nothing, I would be dead. Milan took a sip of his own water. The wine was poisoned. Ricin, most likely. Small dose, tasteless. I would have died within hours, surrounded by doctors who couldn't save me. He paused. The man who switched the glass was named Alexei Sokolov. He worked for me for 3 years. The man who made the phone call was Gregor Petrov. He worked for me for 12. Ellie's stomach twisted. Worked? Past tense. Yes. She didn't ask what happened to them. She didn't want to know, Milan continued, his voice matter of fact. They were paid by a rival organization to eliminate me. The plan was professional, well-funded. It should have worked. His dark eyes locked on hers. It didn't, because you interfered. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Milan's tone sharpened. You did nothing wrong. You acted with integrity in a moment when most people would have chosen cowardice. That deserves respect, not apology. Ellie's hands trembled. She shoved them in her jacket pockets. What do you want from me? Nothing. I don't believe you. Smart. Milan set down his glass. Here is the truth, Miss Smith. You saved my life. That creates an obligation. In my world, debts are paid. Always. I don't want your money. I know. You left $500 in tips last night. You came to work today anyway. Money isn't your currency. He moved to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. But you need to understand something. The people who tried to kill me, they're still out there. And if they learn that you interfered, if they realize you're the reason I'm alive, they will come for you. Ice flooded Ellie's veins. So what are you saying? I'm saying you're in danger whether you want to be or not. And I'm offering protection. From the people who want you dead. Yes, because I saved you. Yes. Ellie laughed sharp, almost hysterical. This is insane. I should go to the police. And tell them what? That you witnessed an attempted poisoning you can't prove by people you can't identify? The police can't protect you from this, Miss Smith. I can. How? Milan turned to face her. The men outside your apartment. The ones who followed you to work. They're mine. They've been watching you since last night. Ensuring your safety. Ellie's breath caught. You've been stalking me? I've been protecting you. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Then let me be clearer. Milan's voice dropped, losing its careful neutrality. The Belov family wants me dead. They've invested significant resources into making that happen. If they discover you're involved, they will leverage you, torture, kidnapping, worse to get to me. I won't allow that. Why not? You don't know me. No. But I know what you did. You chose truth over safety. That's rare enough to be worth protecting. Ellie's head spun. Nothing about this made sense. Mafia bosses didn't protect random waitresses. They eliminated loose ends. Unless you feel guilty, she said quietly. Milan's expression didn't change. I feel responsible. There's a difference. Is there? For the first time, something flickered in Milan's eyes. Not guilt. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like respect. You're brave, he said. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. That shouldn't get you killed. Ellie moved to the windows, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere down there was her apartment, her life, her normal existence. But normal was gone now. Shattered the moment she'd reached for that wine glass. What are my options? She asked. Accept protection. Let my people watch you. Live your life as normally as possible while I dismantle the threat. And if I refuse, then you're on your own. And I give you 3 days before the Belovs find you. Ellie closed her eyes. This wasn't a choice. It was an illusion of choice. If I agree, what does that make me? Milan stepped beside her, close enough that she could see her reflection in the window overlapping with his. Two people who shouldn't exist in the same world, connected by one impossible moment. It makes you smart, he said quietly. It makes you a survivor. And it makes you someone under my protection. In my world, that means something. Ellie turned to face him. Studied those dark eyes that had measured her worth in a single glance. I have conditions, she said. Milan's eyebrow lifted slightly. Name them. Your people stay outside. They don't approach me unless there's real danger. They don't interfere with my life. Agreed. And when this is over, when whoever wants you dead is gone, your protection ends. I go back to being nobody. Milan considered this. Agreed. On one condition of my own. What? You call me if anything feels wrong. Anything unusual. A strange car. A person who doesn't belong. You don't try to be brave alone. Ellie extended her hand. Deal. Milan looked at her hand for a long moment. Then he shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and for just a second, almost gentle. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For choosing to live. He released her hand and nodded to Dimitri. Take Miss Smith home. Make sure she arrives safely. As Ellie walked back to the elevator, she glanced back once. Milan stood at the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, looking like a king surveying his kingdom, or a man counting everything he stood to lose. Dimitri drove Ellie home in silence. She sat in the back seat, staring at her hands, the same hands that had switched a wineglass and changed everything. They looked ordinary, small, incapable of the weight they now carried. The Mercedes pulled up to her building just after 9 p.m. We'll be nearby, Dimitri said as he opened her door. You won't see us, but we're there. That's supposed to be comforting? Dimitri's expression softened almost imperceptibly. The boss doesn't give protection lightly, Miss Smith. You're safer than you realize. Safe, Ellie repeated. Right. She climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, each step heavier than the last. When she unlocked the door, Jessica was waiting on the couch with 2 wine glasses and a bottle of Cabernet. Okay, Jessica said without preamble. Spill. What the hell is going on? Ellie collapsed beside her. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. I work in an ER. I've heard everything. Ellie accepted the wineglass, took a long drink, and made a decision. Not the whole truth. Jessica didn't need to know about Mafia bosses and assassination attempts, but enough. Last night, I saw something at work. Something bad. And now the people involved know I saw it. Jessica's eyes widened. What kind of bad? Like illegal bad. Like dangerous bad. Jesus, Ellie. Did you go to the police? The police can't help with this. Then who can? Ellie thought of Milan's dark eyes, his measured voice, the weight of protection that felt both like a shield and a chain. I'm handling it, she said quietly. Jessica studied her for a long moment. You're scaring me. I'm scaring myself. They drank in silence, the wine doing nothing to ease the knot in Ellie's chest. Finally, Jessica spoke. Whatever this is, you know I'm here, right? If you need anything, money, a place to stay, someone to call the cops when you're too stubborn to I'm here. Ellie's throat tightened. I know. Thank you. But even as she said it, she understood the distance now between them. Jessica lived in a world where problems could be solved with phone calls and police reports. Ellie had stepped into somewhere else entirely, somewhere darker. Somewhere there was no coming back from. Milan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his study reviewing surveillance footage, financial records, and the organizational chart of the Belov family that Dimitri had compiled. Konstantin Belov, 53 years old, former Soviet military intelligence, built his criminal empire in Milwaukee over 20 years with methodical brutality. He had 3 sons, 7 lieutenants, operations in 6 states. And now, a direct conflict with Milan de Kock. Milan's phone buzzed. Dimitri, the construction site on Halstead. Belov Front Company. We hit it an hour ago. And payroll records, shipping manifests. Enough to tie them to 3 unsolved murders and 2 federal trafficking investigations. Dimitri paused. They'll know it was us. Good. Let them know. Milan ended the call and returned to the surveillance footage. One screen showed Ellie's apartment building. The angles switched every 30 seconds. Front entrance, side alley, parking area. His men were positioned in a rotation that left no blind spots. She was safe, for now. But safety was expensive, and temporary. Milan knew from experience that protection could become a prison if it lasted too long. Ellie would grow to resent it. Resent him, which meant he needed to end this quickly. Permanently. 3 days passed. Ellie returned to work at Belmonte, moving through her shifts with mechanical efficiency. She smiled at customers, recommended wines, collected tips, and pretended not to notice the black SUV that was always somewhere nearby. On Thursday evening, she was clearing plates from a table when Thomas pulled her aside. There's someone asking for you. Table 12. Ellie's heart stopped. Who? Didn't give a name. Just said it was important. She moved through the dining room on unsteady legs, expecting Milan or Dimitri or someone from that world. Instead, she found a woman, mid-40s, blonde hair in a severe bun, wearing an expensive gray suit. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ellie Smith?" the woman asked. "Yes, my name is Catherine Wells. I'm an attorney. May I have a moment of your time?" Every instinct screamed danger. "I'm working. This won't take long. It's regarding an incident that occurred here several nights ago." Ellie's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." Catherine's smile sharpened. "I think you do. A certain intervention you made, on behalf of a certain gentleman." The dining room suddenly felt too small, too exposed. "I really need to get back to work." "Of course. But first," Catherine slid a business card across the table. "My clients are very interested in speaking with you. About what you saw, what you know. They're prepared to compensate you generously for your cooperation." Ellie's hands trembled. "Your clients?" "Associates of the Belov family. I'm sure you've heard the name." The world tilted. They knew. Somehow, they knew. "I have nothing to say to your clients." Catherine's smile vanished. "Miss Smith, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider. My clients can be very persuasive and very generous, but they can also be," she paused delicately, "less pleasant when their offers are refused." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Ellie's phone was in her apron pocket. Milan's number programmed in for exactly this moment. "I need to think about it," Ellie said, her voice barely steady. "You have 24 hours. After that, my clients will assume you've chosen unwisely." Catherine stood, smoothing her suit. "The card has my number. Use it." She walked out, leaving Ellie standing frozen in the middle of the dining room. Ellie lasted exactly 7 minutes before panic overtook professionalism. She told Thomas she was sick, not entirely a lie, and fled to the break room. Her hands shook so badly she could barely unlock her phone. She dialed. Milan answered on the first ring. "Miss Smith." "They found me." The words tumbled out. "A woman. A lawyer. She said she represented the Belov family. She knew what I did. She knew." "Where are you?" "Belmonte. The break room. Stay there. Dimitri is 3 minutes away." "She threatened me, Milan. She said if I don't cooperate." "You won't cooperate, and nothing will happen to you. Do you understand?" "How can you promise that?" "Because I've spent the last 3 days dismantling their operations piece by piece. They're desperate. That's why they approached you. They're hoping you'll give them leverage they no longer have." Ellie pressed her back against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the cold tile floor. "I'm scared. I know. But fear is what they want. Don't give it to them." "What do I do?" "You do nothing. Dimitri will bring you somewhere safe, and I will handle Catherine Wells and whoever sent her." "How?" Milan's voice went cold. "The same way I handle all threats to people under my protection." The line went quiet except for their breathing, hers ragged, his controlled. "Ellie," Milan said, and it was the first time he'd used her first name. "I made you a promise. You're protected. That means something. Trust me. I don't know how to trust someone like you. Someone like me. Someone dangerous." Milan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Dangerous men make the best protectors, Miss Smith. We understand what we're protecting you from." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The break room door opened. Dimitri stood there, calm and professional. "Miss Smith, come with me, please." Ellie stood on shaking legs. "Milan, I'll see you soon. And when I do, Catherine Wells will no longer be a problem." The line went dead. Dimitri extended his hand. "It's going to be all right." Ellie took it. And as Dimitri led her through the kitchen's back exit to a waiting car, she realized something that terrified her more than the threats. She was beginning to believe him. Milan hung up and stared at Catherine Wells' business card displayed on his computer screen. Dimitri had already pulled her information. Licensed attorney. 3 arrests for witness tampering. All charges dropped. Known associate of the Belov organization. Milan made 2 phone calls. The first was to his own attorney. The second was to someone who didn't have business cards or offices or any legal existence whatsoever. By morning, Catherine Wells would understand her mistake. By evening, the Belovs would know that touching Ellie Smith had been their last miscalculation. Milan allowed himself a cold smile. They'd tried to use her as leverage. Instead, they'd given him justification, and Milan de Kock never wasted an opportunity. Dimitri drove Ellie to a different building. Smaller, older, but no less secure. Safe house, he explained as they rode the elevator to the 4th floor. The boss has several. You'll stay here tonight. The apartment was sparse but clean. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, windows with bulletproof glass that Ellie pretended not to notice. There's food in the fridge, clean clothes in the closet, various sizes. Bathroom has everything you need. Dimitri handed her a phone, not hers. This is secure. Milan's number is programmed. So is mine. Don't use your personal phone. For how long? Until it's safe. When will that be? Dimitri's expression was unreadable. Soon. He left, and Ellie was alone. She sank onto the couch, still wearing her work uniform, and finally let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Fear, anger, the surreal horror of being hunted by people who killed as casually as breathing. The secure phone buzzed. Milan, are you settled? Ellie, if you can call this settled. Milan, I know this isn't what you wanted. Ellie, I wanted to go to work and come home. That's all. Milan, I'm sorry. Ellie stared at those 2 words. A mafia boss apologizing. The absurdity almost made her laugh. Ellie, what happens now? Milan, I end this. You stay safe. Then you go back to your life. Ellie, you make it sound simple. Milan, it is simple. The execution is complicated. Ellie, that's not comforting. Milan, it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be honest. Ellie set the phone down and moved to the window. 4 stories below, Chicago continued its night cars passing, people living normal lives, completely unaware of the invisible war being fought in their city's shadows. She'd saved 1 man's life. Now she was trapped in his world. And somewhere out there, the Belov family was planning their next move. Konstantin Belov received the news at midnight. Catherine Wells was arrested, his lieutenant reported. Federal charges. Witness tampering, conspiracy, racketeering. Someone provided evidence. DeCock, Konstantin said quietly. Yes. Konstantin stood at the window of his Milwaukee estate, looking out at manicured lawns and private security. He was old enough to remember the Soviet Union, smart enough to have left before it collapsed, ruthless enough to have built an empire in America that rivaled anything he'd controlled back home. And Milan DeCock was dismantling it piece by piece. The construction company, the shipping operation, now his personal attorney, all because of a failed assassination. The waitress, Konstantin said. Wells approached her. Yes. Before her arrest. So DeCock knows we know. Yes. Konstantin turned to face his lieutenant, a man named Yuri, who'd been with him for 15 years. Then we don't have the element of surprise anymore. No, sir. But we do have desperation. And desperate men make mistakes. Konstantin moved to his desk, opened a drawer, and removed a file. Inside, photographs of Milan, his building, his businesses, and 1 photo of Ellie Smith, leaving Belmonte in her server's uniform. DeCock is protecting her, Konstantin said, which means she matters to him. A weakness. Perhaps, or a trap. Konstantin studied the photograph. Young, ordinary. Nothing about her suggested she was worth protecting. Yet Milan had moved her to a safe house, assigned guards, dismantled operations to send a message. Why? Find out everything about her, Konstantin ordered. Family, friends, routines, everything. And if DeCock is watching her, he can't watch everyone she knows. Konstantin smiled cold, calculated. Everyone has leverage, Yuri. We just need to find hers. Milan received Konstantin's next move at 2 a.m. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photograph. Jessica Torres, leaving the hospital where she worked. Unaware she was being photographed. Unaware she'd just become a target. Milan stared at the image for 10 seconds. Then he forwarded it to Dimitri with 2 words. Find her, he called Ellie. She answered immediately, voice thick with sleep. What's wrong? Your roommate, Jessica. Where is she tonight? Ellie's breath caught. She's working a double shift. She gets off at 6 a.m. Why? What happened? The Belovs are watching her. No, Milan. No, she has nothing to do with this. I know. That's why they chose her. They're trying to draw me out. Create a situation where I have to choose between protecting you and protecting her. You have to protect her. I will. I'm sending people to the hospital now. But Ellie, Milan paused. This is what I warned you about. They're escalating because they're losing, which makes them more dangerous, not less. Ellie's voice broke. She's innocent. She doesn't even know what I did. I know. And she'll stay innocent, I promise. Your promises cost people their lives. The words hit harder than Milan expected. Because they were true. Yes, he said quietly. They do. But they also save them. Jessica will be safe. You have my word, and if your word isn't enough? Milan looked at the photograph again. Jessica Torres, smiling, exhausted from a long shift, completely oblivious to the danger she was in. Because Ellie had saved his life. Because he'd offered protection. Because violence always spread like cancer, consuming everything it touched. Then I'll do what I should have done from the beginning, Milan said. I'll end this tonight. He hung up before Ellie could respond. Then he made a call to someone he'd hoped never to use. It's Milan, he said when the line connected. I need the location of Konstantin Belov. All of them. Every property, every safe house, every place he might run. That kind of information costs. Name your price. 200,000. Done. How fast? 3 hours. You have 2. Milan ended the call and stood, moving to his closet. In the back, behind the suits and shoes, was a safe. Inside the safe, a gun he hadn't touched in 4 years, a suppressor, and a passport with a name that wasn't his. He'd built his empire on intelligence and patience. But sometimes patience ran out, and sometimes the only way to protect people was to become the monster they feared. Milan loaded the gun, checked the suppressor, and pocketed both. By sunrise, either Konstantin Belov would be dead, or Milan would be. Either way, this ended tonight. The information arrived at 4:17 a.m. Konstantin Belov maintained 6 properties, 3 in Milwaukee, 2 in Chicago, 1 in Gary, Indiana. He rotated between them on no fixed schedule, a precaution that had kept him alive for decades. But Milan's source was good. Very good. He's at the Chicago townhouse, Dmitri confirmed, reading from his laptop. Lincoln Park. Security team of 4. Cameras on all entrances. Neighbors are close. Any gunfire will draw police in minutes. Then we don't use guns, Milan said. Dmitri looked up. You're going in personally? Yes. That's a mistake. Send a team. A team makes this about territory, about power. I go alone. It's personal. It sends a different message. It sends a message that you're reckless. Milan met Dmitri's eyes. He threatened someone under my protection. That requires a personal response. Dmitri was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll position men nearby, just in case. Good. Milan checked his watch. Jessica's shift ended in 90 minutes. His people were already at the hospital, maintaining a discreet perimeter. She'd be safe. But safety was temporary as long as Konstantin lived. The car ride to Lincoln Park took 23 minutes. Milan sat in the back seat, perfectly calm, his mind moving through scenarios with clinical precision. 4 guards, cameras, neighbors. All obstacles. None insurmountable. The townhouse appeared at 5:32 a.m. Elegant brick facade, black iron gate, security camera above the entrance. Milan called the phone number his source had provided. It rang 4 times. Then a man answered in Russian. Yes? My name is Milan de Kock. Tell Konstantin I'm outside. Tell him I'm alone. Tell him we're going to have a conversation. Silence. And tell him if he doesn't come out in 5 minutes, I'll come in. And his security team won't survive that. Milan hung up. Dmitri's voice crackled through the earpiece. You're insane, probably. You're giving him time to prepare. I'm giving him a choice. Dignity or violence. Most men choose dignity when it's offered. And if he chooses violence? Milan touched the gun beneath his jacket. Then I've come prepared. 4 minutes and 37 seconds later, the townhouse door opened. Konstantin Belov stepped out. He was shorter than Milan expected. Gray hair, expensive suit, the bearing of a man who'd commanded respect through fear for half a century. 2 guards flanked him, hands inside their jackets. Milan stepped out of the car. Alone, hands visible, no weapon drawn. The 2 men faced each other across 15 feet of sidewalk. You must be very confident or very stupid, Konstantin said in accented English. Neither. Just efficient. You come to my home? Threaten me? I come to offer terms. Konstantin laughed harsh, humorless. Terms? You've destroyed my operations, arrested my lawyer, and now you want to negotiate? No. I want to explain how this ends. I'm listening. Milan took 3 steps closer. The guards tensed, but Konstantin held up a hand. You tried to kill me, Milan said quietly. You failed. Then you threatened an innocent woman to get to me. That was your mistake. She stopped being innocent when she interfered. She's a waitress who saw something wrong and acted. Nothing more. In our world, there's no such thing as innocence. Maybe not, but there are rules. You violated them. Constantine's expression hardened. Rules? You speak of rules? You're dismantling everything I've built because you came into my city, my territory, and tried to take what's mine. That requires consequences. So you declare war? No. Milan's voice dropped to something colder than ice. I declare ending. Your operations in Chicago are finished. Your people leave. Your money dries up. You return to Milwaukee and stay there. And if I refuse, then this conversation ends differently. Constantine studied him. Two old predators measuring each other, calculating odds, weighing survival against pride. You're one man, Constantine said finally. One man with evidence that ties you to 17 murders, 6 federal investigations, and enough financial crimes to put you in prison until you die. Milan pulled out a phone, showed Constantine a screen. Files, documents, photographs. All of this goes to the FBI if anything happens to me, to Ellie Smith, or to anyone connected to her. All of it. And your organization collapses. Constantine's jaw clenched. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you an exit. Take it. The moment stretched. Dawn was breaking, pink light touching the sky. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. The woman, Constantine said. She matters to you. She's under my protection. That's not what I asked. Milan didn't answer. Constantine smiled slowly. You care. After all these years, all the violence, you finally care about something. Do we have an agreement? Constantine looked at his guards, then back at Milan. The calculation was visible. Pride versus survival. Anger versus pragmatism. Finally, he nodded. We have an agreement. Chicago is yours. I return to Milwaukee. The woman lives. You keep your evidence buried. And if you break this agreement, then I suppose we'll both die, won't we? Milan extended his hand. Constantine looked at it for a long moment, then shook it. You've made a powerful enemy today, Constantine said. I've made a cautious one. That's better. Milan released his hand, turned, and walked back to his car. Every step measured, controlled, expecting a bullet that never came. He climbed in. Drive, he told Dmitri. As they pulled away, Milan looked back once. Constantine still stood on the sidewalk, watching. Two predators, now circling separate territories. The war was over before it began. The sun was fully risen by the time Milan returned to his penthouse. He stood at the windows, still wearing yesterday's suit, watching Chicago wake beneath him. The city stretched out in all directions, his city, bought with blood and strategy and years of calculated patience. And somewhere in that sprawl of steel and concrete, a waitress was waking in a safe house, probably wondering if she'd ever feel safe again. Milan pulled out his phone and called Dmitri. It's done? It's done. Constantine accepted terms. Pull the surveillance on Jessica Torres, but keep eyes on Ellie for another 72 hours, just to be sure. And after that, she goes home. Back to her life. Dmitri was quiet for a moment. You think she can? After all this? Milan didn't answer. Because he didn't know. He ended the call and stood alone in the silence of his penthouse, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in 4 days. 1 assassination attempt, 2 traitors eliminated, 1 war prevented, and 1 woman whose simple act of courage had changed the trajectory of it all. Ellie woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a disorienting moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it crashed back the safe house. Catherine Wells, Jessica being watched, Milan's promise to end it. She grabbed the secure phone. No messages. Her heart hammered as she dialed Milan's number. He answered immediately. You're awake. Is Jessica safe? Yes. My people stayed with her until she got home an hour ago. She never knew they were there. Relief flooded through Ellie so powerfully her knees went weak. And the Belovs? Won't be a problem anymore. We've reached an understanding. What kind of understanding? The permanent kind. Ellie sat on the edge of the bed, processing. You killed him. No. But I gave him a reason to stay away that was more compelling than pride. I don't understand your world. I know. That's why you don't belong in it. Milan paused. Pack your things. Dmitri will take you home this afternoon. This is over. Just like that? Just like that. Ellie should have felt relief. Instead, she felt unmoored. 4 days ago, her biggest problem was making rent. Now she'd been inside something most people only saw in movies and survived. Milan? Yes? Thank you. For keeping your promise. For protecting Jessica. I told you I would. I know. But men like you. She stopped, unsure how to finish. Men like me don't keep promises? His tone was dry, almost amused. I was going to say I didn't expect you to care about a stranger's roommate. I don't care about your roommate. I care about keeping my word to you. The distinction felt important, though Ellie couldn't quite say why. Can I ask you something? She said. You can ask. Why me? Why go to all this trouble for someone you don't know? Milan was quiet for so long she thought he'd hung up. Then, because you did what most people won't. You saw something wrong and fixed it. No hesitation, no calculation. Just action. Another pause. That deserves protection. It deserves respect. And in my world, respect is the rarest currency there is. I'm not special, Milan. I'm just a waitress who got lucky. No. You're someone who made a choice when it mattered. That's not luck. That's character. His voice softened. I've spent 17 years surrounded by people who only act when there's profit. You acted when there was only danger. That's special, whether you see it or not. Ellie's throat tightened. She'd never expected a man like Milan de Kock to see her. Really see her. What happens now? She asked. You go back to your life. I go back to mine. And we just pretend this never happened? If that's what you want. Was it? Ellie didn't know anymore. Part of her wanted to forget everything, the wine glass, the threats, the safe house. But another part of her had changed in these 4 days, had seen what she was capable of under pressure, had learned that bravery wasn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it was just reaching across a table and choosing truth. I don't know if I can go back to who I was, she admitted. Then don't, Milan said simply. Be who you are now, someone stronger, someone who knows her own worth. Because I saved a mafia boss? Because you saved a life. Mine happens to be complicated, but the principle is the same. Ellie almost smiled. You're a strange man, Milan de Kock. I've been called worse. She could hear the faint amusement in his voice. Dimitri will be there at 2. Take care of yourself, Miss Smith. Ellie, she corrected. After everything, I think you can call me Ellie. Ellie, he repeated, as if testing how her name felt. Take care of yourself, Ellie. He hung up, and Ellie sat in the quiet safe house, holding a phone that belonged to a world she was about to leave behind, wondering why that felt more like loss than relief. Dimitri drove her home at exactly 2 p.m. They didn't speak much. He carried her small bag up the 3 flights, checked her apartment thoroughly despite her protests, and handed her back her personal phone. The protection detail ends tonight, he said. But if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call this number. He handed her a card with a single phone number. No name, no title. Will I see you again? Ellie asked. Probably not. But you'll be safe. That's what matters. He left, and Ellie was alone in her apartment for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Jessica burst through the door an hour later, carrying takeout and worry. Oh my God, I've been texting you for 2 days. Where have you been? Are you okay? Ellie hugged her friend, holding on longer than usual. I'm okay. I'm sorry I worried you. What happened? The situation at work got complicated, but it's resolved now. Jessica pulled back, studying her face. You look different. Different how? I don't know. Older, maybe. Or just tired. I am tired, Ellie admitted. But I'm okay. I promise. They ate Chinese food on the couch and watched bad TV. And slowly, Ellie felt herself settling back into the rhythm of normal life. But normal felt different now, like a coat that didn't quite fit anymore. That night, Ellie returned to work at Belmonte. Thomas greeted her with concern. You feeling better? Much better, thanks. She tied her apron, picked up her tray, and moved through the dining room with the same efficiency she'd always had. But now she noticed things she'd missed before. The way certain customers commanded space, the subtle hierarchies, the unspoken rules. She'd been living in this world all along, she realized. She just hadn't been paying attention. At 9 p.m., a single diner arrived. Milan de Kock. No security, no companions, just a man in a dark suit, requesting a quiet table. Ellie's heart stopped when she saw him. He saw her too. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and something passed between them: recognition, respect, understanding. She approached his table, notepad ready, professional mask in place. Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink? Milan's lips curved slightly. Water is fine. And the wine list, please. Ellie handed it to him. Their fingers didn't touch. The 2015. Barolo is excellent, she said. If you're interested, I trust your recommendation. She poured his water, took his order, and walked away. They didn't speak beyond the necessary exchanges, didn't acknowledge what had happened, didn't say goodbye. When Milan finished his meal and left, he placed 5 $100 bills on the table, the same as before, but this time, there was a note beneath them. You chose courage when it cost you everything. That's worth more than money. If you ever need anything, truly need it, you know how to reach me. M. Ellie stared at the note for a long moment. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it in her apron pocket. She went back to work, clearing tables and pouring wine and being exactly who she'd always been, but now she carried something else. The knowledge that she'd stood at the intersection of life and death and made a choice that mattered. The knowledge that somewhere in this city, a dangerous man considered her worth protecting. And the knowledge that bravery wasn't always about being fearless. Sometimes it was just about being unable to look away. Ellie Smith had saved Milan de Kock's life with a single gesture, and what he did next gave her something just as valuable, the certainty that she was capable of far more than she'd ever imagined. That courage lived in small moments, and that sometimes, one choice could change everything. She finished her shift, walked home through Chicago's November streets, and climbed 3 flights to her apartment. Normal, safe, free. But forever changed by the second she chose truth over safety, and somehow, that felt like exactly enough. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.